Alright, we're going to do a full race traction bar install and an EF chassis. We're just going to kind of go over what needs to be removed. What we're replacing is this front cross member here, and it bolts underneath the chassis. The radius rod arms attached to the control arms over here. We're going to be loosening these two bolts on this lower control arm and then the other side. The hardware packet that comes with the full race traction bar. Really nice stuff here. High quality Heim joints, nice anodized gold finish here. All the fittings and washers we're going to need here. These are specifically machined spacers, which you'll see us in use here soon. It looks like they're going to have us reuse the factory bolts for this, which I could see it's about the same thickness. That's the tow hook replacement that we just removed. I have some cool bolts that I'll be using to replace this with, otherwise you can use the stock ones. Alright, our kit actually didn't come with instructions, but not to worry, we were able to figure this out. So what we're looking at right here is the factory radiator support brackets, right? So this is what's going to hold up your factory style radiator if you decided you wanted to use one in this chassis. We're actually going to have to trim them off, okay? The traction bar actually consumes the same area as these do, so it sets up right against the radiator core support, as you can see here. Not to worry, check it out. Our bar actually has those mount tabs on the bar itself. I'm removing the tabs because it looks like it's going to be a little bit hard to get our blade through. So we're actually going to be sawing only through one sheet of sheet metal versus two, because it looks like we'll end up cutting through this part to get through the whole thing. And so if these things were just gone, it's just going to be less of a hassle. And it looks like it's only going to be cutting on like an edge of this extra radiator support tab, which means the blade's going to want to walk around and it's going to make it a little bit harder. It won't be a straight line, it will dig into our core support. And so since I want this to be a clean cut, I'm going to remove these tabs and it should cut through smoothly. Alright, now that the tabs are removed, I'm going to go ahead and use a flat disc wheel here to kind of smooth it out, since it's sharp, preventative. You know, like you're going to be moving around here a lot. Maybe in the future you need to get into for whatever reason. There's some sharp edges here. You might as well just take them down when you're right here and you have access to it. It turns out like the traction bar actually does rub up against some of this here. Mostly looks like it's over here where the original radiator tab was. It kind of rubs up against it to where maybe I'll need to take out a few more inches, but it doesn't look like it's going to be easy with the Sawzall. You know, the Sawzall is going to walk around. It doesn't really make a straight cut because we're going through like a few layers of steel there, and then there's going to be some studs like this that we're going to come up across. So I actually just might use a mallet, I'm sorry, not a mallet, but like a hammer, kind of help massage the area for some clearance. Yeah, so even that wasn't enough. I'm probably going to use the flat disc in here, because that's going to be like the smoothest, easiest transition for us. It looks like this side works out well, but once we get over to this tab right here on the driver's side, it's sticking out just a little bit more than we need to. Installed. These are the bolts that I was talking about that I was going to use, but again, you can use the stock ones. Okay, we have a hardware kit that installs to the front and then to the back. The hardware kit that installs to the front is going to be consistent of this bolt here, these two aluminum washers here, a washer for the back, and then a lock nut. So you'll just simply slide the bolt through. I already had to work some of the powder coating out. Then this aluminum spacer goes in between the Heim and the bolt. We're going to have one for each side. It's going to increase our mobility a bit from vertical mobility. It's going to take up the space on the opposite side. Slide it through, add your washer, and then your lock nut. And do the same on the opposite side. Then we'll move to the control arms. Alright, this is what it should look like. You can see the bolt went through there. You can see the washers, the aluminum spacers in between each side, and then the lock nut. Now we're going to move on to the control arm side. Alright, this is the control arm side, and each side are gonna come with these steel machined time washers. Alright, with those steel washers installed, it just sits on top of the control arm like it does, like you see here, one on either side. There's another part here, which is this adapter, I guess you would want to call it. What it does, it just makes up the difference on both sides. So it's going to give the top mounting position, and then of course it strengthens that area on the opposite side of it. Come with hardware that goes through both sides. And remember, this is an adjustable control arm, so if the Heim joint isn't aligning itself with the lower portion, then you could either just move the control arm out because it's out of adjust right now, or adjust the rod to the length that you're going to need it. So start those start those bolts, get them threaded first, and then you can start tightening things, and that's essentially it. That will be the conclusion of the install. But remember, this is part of your alignment, so this changes your caster. So the point of this is to either increase or decrease the amount of caster you have. So in the drag race scenario, we would probably want positive caster, which would drive the wheel more forward, which would take up the initial inertia of the wheels when you take off, if that makes any sense to you. So when you preload the engine, you rock the engine forward in its forward momentum, and the wheels will want to move forward inside the wheel well. What this will do is take up that slack. Alright, it's fully tightened and it installed pretty well. I still have the driver's side to finish up, but this pretty much concludes our install, because it's just the same order that you'll have to do on the driver's side. But you can see how much more room it clears up than the factory cross member. Because remember, just about where this mount position underneath the car is about as wide as the original one was. There are some other traction bars out there, and they actually don't feature a mount position here. And what will end up happening, which I've noticed years and years ago, is these bolts here. This is what will hold the crossmember on, but it also takes the entire load of the control arm. Right? So what ends up happening is these bolts over here, that's all that would hold it if the traction bar does not have this lower portion, which is just like a third mount point, which holds the load of the forward momentum. Well, if it does not have that, what ends up happening is behind the sheet metal there are welded nuts, and that's what those bolts attach to back there. Those welded nuts end up snapping off because the whole traction bar ends up rotating this way, because the the hub is getting the power. Of course, then once there's traction, then the whole front of the vehicle moves forward, and then once it moves forward, then it moves the rest of the chassis, and then that's kind of how the vehicle moves. Well, so that means those three bolts are holding all of the power that the engine is producing, and it ends up rocking it in this manner. Well, because this rod here is holding it, then it actually can't rock anywhere, right? So it's got these points right here is triangling all that inertia. But because that's not there, then those nuts end up breaking, and this whole thing ends up swinging back and forth. And those are the versions that do not have this lower part here. If it doesn't have that, man, stay away from it, because it's pretty dangerous. Because let's say on a launch, it will snap on you, and then the vehicle is all over the place in between shifts on both spots, because this whole rod is just like rocking back and forth. So make sure you have a version that has this. Full Race has always had that lower portion. I don't believe that they ever made a traction bar for the EF without it. So just keep that in mind when you're sourcing yours. There are others that are less expensive than this, but they are using, maybe they're not using the same high strength Heim joints that Full Race is, and there's a lot of money wrapped up in just the Heim joints themselves. If you were to price high duty Heim joints, then you'll find out that these actually are quite expensive on their own. So that's essentially what you're paying for. You're paying for high quality parts, and that's what you want, because we're building high quality machines. Alright guys, happy tuning.